They tell you the night shift has a different gravity. The lights are lower, the halls feel longer, and sound travels in ways it doesn't during the day. You learn the language of machines, the sigh of a ventilator, the soft cough of an IV pump, the staccato alarm that means someone's heart just decided it's had enough. You also learn which noises to ignore. Hospitals make 1,000 harmless sounds in the dark. But there's one sound I was taught to ignore the first week: the overhead page to wingC. wingC is closed. If you walk the main corridor past the double fire doors, you'll hit a lit sign that still reads CWING, but the doors themselves are chained from the inside with a thick brass padlock. Behind them is a dead hallway, a stretch of tile that used to lead to oncology. 5 years ago, there was a fire, no one died, but the whole unit was gutted with smoke and water damage. Administration decided it was cheaper to expand elsewhere than to renovate. Maintenance sealed it. Lights cut. Vents capped. Off the map. And yet, sometimes around 2 or 3 in the morning, the overhead speakers will crackle and a female voice will say, "Dr. Rothman to wingC. Dr. Rothman, please report to wingC." The veterans told me it was a glitch in the old paging system that nobody wanted to pay to fix. "If you hear it, you didn't," my preceptor said, only half joking. "Keep your head down and keep charting." I didn't think about it much my first month. Nights are a fog of meds, vitals, empty coffee cups. But 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday that felt like a Thursday and tasted like stale gum, I was covering observation beds when the speakers popped. "Dr. Rothman to wingC." 2 seconds later, it repeated a little louder. "Dr. Rothman, please report to wingC." I looked up at the ceiling tile, then at the clock. 3:12 a.m. "Old system burping," said Haiti, the tech at the station. He didn't even glance up from the monitor. "Ignore it." We went back to charting. At 3:17, 5 minutes later, the page chimed again. "Dr. Rothman, wingC." Now the voice sounded warmer than the usual automated page, like a person leaning toward a mic. Huddy's fingers froze on the keyboard for a heartbeat, then resumed. He pretended not to hear. I wish I could say I did the same. The third time it came, something in me tightened, not a big thing, just a knot under the ribs. I told myself I was curious, or maybe I wanted a walk to wake up. I told myself a lot of things as I stood and grabbed the master keys from the hook. "I'm going to grab blankets from supply," I told Haiti. "Cool," he said, still not looking. I didn't go to supply. The corridor to wingC isn't far from observation. The hospital was built in phases, and you can feel the seams where one decade attaches to another. The floor tiles shift color. The walls jump from modern antiseptic gray to older plaster, painted a shade they probably once called soothing sage, and now looks like the undertone of a bruise. The CWING doors looked like they always do, chained and padlocked with a tag that read DONOTREMOVE. Beyond them, only dark. I don't know what I expected: voices, movement, something to make me laugh at myself and turn around. Instead, I got the smell. Hospitals have a smell. Even scrubbed clean, they keep a base note of disinfectant and human breath, with hints of coffee and sadness. The air near the C doors was wrong. It was colder, and underneath the cold was a whisper of burned plastic. If you've ever left a cheap kettle on too long and caught it just before it died, you know the smell. Hot, faintly sweet. A little poisonous. I stood there a full minute, listening. Nothing. Then I noticed the chain wasn't actually threaded through both handles. It was looped through the left handle and around a bar welded to the right. If you lifted the left handle hard enough, the chain would slacken just enough to slip an arm through. I didn't decide to try. My hand just moved. The handle was stiff, colder than the metal should have been. It squeaked when I pulled. The chain bowed. I slipped my arm through, awkwardly, and found the interior bar. It took 3 tries to catch it with my fingers and lift. The doors gave a little, enough to let me lean my shoulder in and slide. I know what you're thinking, stupid. I've thought it too, 100 times since. But at the time it felt inevitable, like the voluntary part of me had stepped aside to let something older do the walking. Inside, the dark had weight. I clicked on my penlight. The beam picked out dust like snow in a tunnel of air. The hallway past the doors felt abandoned in a way that clean spaces never can. There were outlines on the wall where signs used to be, squares a few shades lighter than the surrounding paint. A rolling chair with one wheel missing lay tipped on its side, the split plastic of the broken caster sharp as a snapped tooth. I told myself I'd go 20 steps and turn back. I took 21, then 22, then lost count. Dr. Rothman to wingC. The page came again, but it sounded different in there, like it wasn't coming from above me, but from ahead. The penlight shook in my hand. I kept walking. I passed the old nurse station. Someone had draped a dusty sheet over the counter, and the sheet had settled around the equipment like a frozen wave. I lifted a corner. Underneath was an intercom module with big square buttons, the kind you'd see in a school hallway 30 years ago. The PIA switch had a crack across it, a lightning fork through faded plastic. The page came again. This time the speaker wasn't the ceiling, it was the intercom box. The tiny grill hissed, and that same woman's voice, not automated, human, came through, soft as brushing your cheek. "Dr. Rothman, please." For a second, I wasn't on night shift in an empty wing. I was 8 years old, and my mother was calling my father's name from the kitchen, tired and trying not to sound it. The feeling hit hard and vanished. I backed away from the counter and nearly tripped over the corner of the sheet. The patient rooms in wingC were square and small. My light found the numbers above the doors: C301, C302, C303. The third had scorch marks around the frame that weren't there on the others, little fingers of soot reaching out across the paint. My throat tightened. Stupid! I moved on. At C307, I stopped. The door was shut like the rest, but the call light above the frame, the flat plastic rectangle that glows when a patient hits their button, was on. It pulsed slowly, sickly yellow, the color of old teeth. I stood there, very still. Another hospital, another year, someone might have wired the system to test. But this wing wasn't wired to anything. The power feeds were cut. If you shoved a plug into an outlet in here, it would give you only silence. The light pulsed once, twice. I put my ear to the door. The wood was cool. I heard nothing from inside except my own breath, and beyond that, the building's heartbeat, vents that weren't supposed to be running, something settling overhead, pipes you swear you can hear thinking. The handle turned when I tried it. The hinges creaked. The smell got thicker, burned plastic and something else. A medicinal sweetness like old cough syrup. The room was empty. No bed, no chair. The window was blacked out with plywood. The edges caulked. On the far wall, someone had drawn a square with a carpenter's pencil, 4 precise lines, like they intended to cut into the drywall, and then changed their mind. On the floor sat a call bell unit, the plastic casing yellowed with age. The cord snaked out under the door, up to the light. Someone had hardwired it directly to the indicator. It shouldn't have been on. I crouched. The unit wasn't connected to power in any way I could see. The cord ran into the wall and ended. Still, the light above me pulsed like a slow breath. I thumbed the cancel on the bell. Nothing. "Dr. Rothman to wingC." The voice came from behind me this time, in the hall, as if whoever was paging had stepped into the corridor and was calling to me by my wrong name, asking me to be someone else. I left the room. I told myself I'd seen enough. Curiosity satisfied. At the nurse station, the intercom's little red TRANSMITLAD was lit. My hand hovered over the button marked RESAT. I pressed it. The light went out. The intercom went quiet. My pen light framed a small label under the unit, written in old adhesive tape, the kind that turns brown at the edges, R. RAHMAN. I don't know why that felt like a punch. People leave labels. It means nothing. I turned away. That's when I heard the footsteps. They weren't the heavy thump of boots or the clack of heels. They were the flat, damp sound of bare feet, quick and close. They ran across tile somewhere to my right, then stopped. I spun the light. It found only dust and an overturned laundry cart. Something brushed my shoulder. Not air, not imagination. It had direction and weight, the way a child's hand has weight when it patters past your sleeve. I swung the light and saw a smear on the fabric of my scrub top, a brownish print the size of a small palm, as if someone had pressed their hand there and left a whisper of iodine. I walked out. I didn't run. My brain instructed my legs. Walk, do not run, because running makes it real, and your back is too open. I walked the same number of steps out that I had taken in, or tried to. I reached the chain doors and shouldered through the gap, bumping the metal hard enough to bruise a rib. Back in the lit corridor, the hospital's normal smell hit like a wave of sanity. The burned plastic sweetness was gone. The overhead speakers were quiet. The clock read 3:36. At the station, Hattie glanced up. "Blankets?" he asked. "Didn't have any," I said. My voice was too thin. I cleared my throat. "I'll grab from third." He nodded and went back to the screen. I sat down with my charting and watched my hands not shake. I told myself I'd dreamt half of it. Lack of sleep puts cracks in you where weird things leak in. But the smear on my scrub top didn't dream. I tossed the shirt at home and tried not to think about it. The next 2 nights were uneventful. I let myself believe the old guy's PA system glitch, nerves, nothing more. Then Friday came. It was busy. We had a double admission at 1 a.m., then a combative withdrawal at 2:20. By the time I sat to breathe, it was 3:05. I took 1 sip of coffee that tasted like cigarette filters, and then the speaker cracked. Dr. Rothman to wingC. The hair rose on my arms. I kept typing. Hattie didn't look up. The second page came, and then the third, spaced in 5s, like someone watching the clock. I held the keys for 20 minutes and didn't stand. And then patient Deeb in OB 6 hit his call bell with the insistence of a toddler with a new toy. He wanted to tell me the TV remote wasn't responding to channel up, only channel down. I replaced the batteries and told him to sleep. When I stepped back into the hallway, a second call light was glowing at the far end, in the direction of C Wing. Not the sealed doors, the light above the small service door across from them that led to a linen closet. The indicator above it pulsed the same old teeth yellow as the one I'd seen in C307. The service door wasn't supposed to have a call light. It wasn't even on the same system. I stood there, coffee clawing its way up my throat, and watched it blink. I don't remember unlocking that door. I remember the closet smell warm dust, the starch of folded sheets. There was a hatch in the back wall I'd never noticed, a rectangle cut into the drywall and screwed back in place. The screws looked fresh compared to the rest of the wall. Someone had put a strip of duct tape across one corner. On the tape, a word in black marker, SPARE. I peeled the tape back and put my ear to the panel. From the other side came the faintest sound, like a radio in another room tuned between stations. Not talk, not music. The idea of voices. I closed the door carefully and locked it. The light above it went out. When I turned back toward the station, Hattie was watching me. His face had that carefully blank expression nurses use when someone's doing something they shouldn't and you don't want to write it down later. "You hearing it?" he asked. "What?" "The page." I nodded. He let out a breath through his nose. Used to be, before the fire, Dr. Rothman was oncology night. He was good. He'd sit with people who were dying like he had nowhere else to be. After the fire, the first month we came back, the page would call him every night, then less. Then, just on some weeks. I don't know why it started up again. "What happened to him?" I asked. Hattie looked at the ceiling in a way that meant he truly didn't know. Transferred? Retired? Everyone old enough to remember is either days or gone. The rest of that shift felt like the kind of dream where you keep trying to pack a bag, but your hands won't pick up anything you need. I finished my charting by force and drove home as the sky went colorless behind the buildings. 2 nights later, I was off. I woke at 3:17 exactly, heart like a fish in my chest. The room smelled faintly like burned plastic. I got up, turned on all the lights, and told myself I was being dramatic. On my next stretch, The page came at 3:12, 3:17, 3:22. It was almost funny in its punctuality. I didn't go to wingC. I cleaned ivy poles like a man scrubbing gilt. I let Haiti field the noise with his practiced ignoring. Then Mr. Deeb coded at 3:29. Real alarm screamed. Real feet ran. We worked him for 6 minutes and bought him a heartbeat. A ragged, fragile thing, but it held. In the aftermath, as we gathered our chests back into our bodies, the overhead cracked. Dr. Rothman to wingC. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion, or the electric aftertaste of adrenaline, or the way the page cut through real life like a knife through the line that divides then from now. I took the keys. I didn't lie to Haiti. I said, "I'm going to see," and he said nothing, and looked at his hands. The doors gave the same way they had before. The burned smell met me like a friend I didn't like. I went straight to see 307. The light above the door was already on, pulsing. Inside, the square on the wall had changed. It wasn't pencil anymore. Someone had cut it. The drywall rectangle leaned against the baseboard. Beyond the hole was a space 2 studs wide, dusty, the inside of a wall. My light sewed its little beam into the cavity and found wires, a dead roach, and at the bottom, a box. It was a small plastic case the size of a paperback, the kind they sell at electronics stores to keep components safe, with a cracked, smoky lid. Inside, a circuit board sat like a fossilized leaf. Printed across the board in ink that had run from heat were 2 words, Rothman Pager. I picked up the box and nearly dropped it. It was warm hotter than it had any right to be, like it had been sitting in sunlight. I set it on the floor, pried the lid, and saw the board was wired to a battery pack grafted in with electrical tape. Oh, improvised. Wrong. Someone had built a device, shoved it into the wall, and left it to cook. And the intercom reset or not kept obeying it. That's when the monitor woke. Hospitals are full of screens. Even in a dead wing, there are terminals. Most won't boot without power. This one did, somehow, though the plug drooped out of a socket that wasn't live. The screen flickered and spit a green cursor into a black field, like a relic from a forgotten decade. Letters rolled across in a slow type no human could duplicate. SUBJECTR. RAHMANSTATUSALREAD. YFAADISEIUNY. My mouth went dry. I stepped back. My heel hit the corner of the hole, and the drywall scraped my ankle. Something moved in the intercom behind me, a tiny rattle like a bead in a child's toy. "I'm not him," I said out loud, because the room had become a person you had to address. "I'm not." The words felt futile. The monitor didn't care. The cursor blinked twice, and then new text slid in. NEWSUBJECTENTERNAME. I turned to go. I made it to the hall. I made it 3 steps, 5, 9. Then the overhead speaker in the dead ceiling opened and whispered. Not the woman's voice, but my own. Recorded, slightly tinny, but mine. Dr. Rothman to wingC. I wish this is where I say I ran. I didn't. I stood there, dumb, and let the sound pass through me. It felt like standing in a doorway with a hand on both frames and realizing you're the door. I went back to the nurse station like I'd been underwater and finally found air again. Hadi looked up and paled. You look like hell. There's a device. In the wall. Something built. It's paging itself. He shook his head. Admin said they pulled all that after the fire. Admin says a lot. We didn't call anyone. Who would we call? Maintenance would shrug. Security would give us a form. The house supervisor would tell us to focus on patient care. So we did. For the rest of the night, no pages came. At 6 a.m., I went back to see 307 to convince myself I'd overreacted. The hole was still there. The box wasn't. On the way out, at the intercom, I saw the old tape label again, R. R-A-A-M-A. I peeled it back. Underneath, in smaller, faded handwriting, was a second label almost erased by time. R-R-A-H-M-A-N-T-E-M-P. The next day, I spent an hour in the basement records room. The clerk, a woman with glasses that magnified her eyes, let me browse the old staff rosters from the year of the fire. There was no Dr. Rothman in oncology. There was a Rothman, R, but not a physician, a night orderly. 6 months on the job, terminated after the fire. Reason, workplace violation. When I asked what that meant, the clerk shrugged. Could be anything. Taking supplies home. Sleeping on shift. Something worse. We didn't digitize the details from that year. As I left, she called after me. We did have one doctor who used to sit nights with patients. He was a pediatrician who volunteered when he couldn't sleep. Not a Rothman, though. Different name. I drove home with the taste of burned plastic in my throat and the feeling that the building had a mouth, and I had been talking into it. I wish I could tell you I quit. I pictured writing a tidy email and walking out into a life where nights are for sleeping and walls are just walls. I pictured that and then found myself clocking in again at dusk as if the punch reader had a gravity I couldn't fight. The following shift, the pages started earlier. 2:57. 3:2:3:7. Every 5 minutes like a metronome. I didn't answer. Patients needed meds and encouragement and blankets and human things. I gave those and pretended the other need wasn't there. At 3:21, OB6's monitor blared a false lead off alarm. I silenced it, checked the wires, taped them down. When I stepped back into the hall, the lights flickered. Not a full stutter, just a blink long enough to take one image of the world and steal it, so when the light returned you had to compare the two and decide what was missing. What was missing was my key ring. It had been clipped to my waistband. Now it wasn't. My left hip felt naked. I checked the floor, my pockets, the station, the bathroom. Nothing. Hadi raised his eyebrows. Sympathy, plus we're so screwed. Without master keys, you are a body without hands. We retraced my steps, me with the suspicion taste of a stolen wallet rising. When we reached the hall by wingC, the keys sat on the floor 3 inches inside the chain doors, as if someone had dropped them on the other side and nudged them into view with a toe. I looked at Hadi. He shook his head once, emphatic. I slid my arm through the gap. The keys were warm. I wish that was the end. It wasn't. You don't get an end with these things. You get a narrowing, a pressure. And if you're lucky, a place where you can stand with your back to something solid and keep breathing. Last night, the page came not at 5-minute intervals, but as a continuous whisper. It didn't say Dr. Rothman anymore. It said my name, not the name on the schedule or the roster, the name my mother used when she wanted me to come home, the one I haven't heard in years except inside my own head. It called it soft patient, as if it had all the time in the world, as if it could wait, as if it had been waiting since long before me and would keep waiting long after. I took the keys and went to wingC and stood in front of C307 and didn't go in. The light above the door pulsed and I let it. I said, quietly, to the empty hall, I won't remember you. The intercom clicked. The old computer in the nurse station hummed, though no one had touched it. Somewhere in the walls, a battery warmed a circuit board and sent a signal into the dark. I took a marker from my pocket, the kind we use to label tubing, and wrote on the wall outside 307 at the level of my eye. IFYOUSEETHISDONOTGOIN. Then I went back to the living, to the patients who ask for extra ice and the ones who need a hand to hold at 4 AE. M. When the long thoughts come. When my shift ended and the sun did that pale trick it does at dawn, I walked out past the chained doors, past the sign that says CWING, past the smell that might be in the air or just in my head. I walked into morning in the ordinary world and said my name out loud to hear it from a human tongue. When I came back tonight, The marker writing was gone. Not scrubbed gone, like no one had ever written anything there. The wall looked the way it did the day of the fire. If that makes sense, the paint holding its breath. So I'm writing this down here while I still remember. Because maybe that old screen wasn't talking to me. Maybe it was leaving a note the way you leave a nightlight on, for your own return. Maybe the loop isn't a trap so much as a bargain the building made to keep something behind the walls from coming out. Give me a name, and I will drop a page. Give me a name, and I will keep them busy while the living sleep. Give me a name, and I will erase it at dawn. If you work nights in a hospital, and you hear a page to a wing that doesn't exist anymore, don't answer. If you do answer, don't go past the third door on the left. If you do go past it, and you find a call light pulsing over a room, with no bed and a hole where a square used to be, don't pick up the box. Don't press the intercom button. Don't read the screen. And if you hear a voice on the that sounds like your own, remember that buildings learn the language of the people inside them. If you tell them your name enough times, they will learn how to say it back. If I forget this tomorrow, someone reading will remember for me. That's the other trick of nights. The way strangers hold each other's stories up to the weak light, like X-rays, seeing what's broken and what's missing and what's trying to heal. I'm going to finish my round now. The page just came again. It didn't call any name this time. It said, softly, like a parent standing at a door that won't open, "Please." And whatever you do, if you ever hear that, don't answer.